Austin Donahoo is the Community Outreach Manager for Welcome US. In his role, he aims to educate communities across the country on how to create a culture of welcome for those seeking refuge in the United States. He has a degree in Christian ministry from North Greenville University and is currently pursuing his Master of Divinity at Duke Divinity School. In his spare time, he enjoys being with his family and staying involved in his local church. He is passionate about the intersection of Christian theology, advocacy, and public policy. Today, he's going to speak on Empowered by Faith, Transforming Disability into Advocacy. Welcome, Austin.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? As said, my name is Austin Donahoo, and I am on the autism spectrum. While I was diagnosed in early adulthood, actually, I've always lived with a sense that I didn't quite fit in. The best way I've always been able to articulate it over the years is I feel like someone on the outside of a fishbowl looking in and just wondering why people act the way they do. The best way, or from difficulties with eye contact over the years, with sensory overload and social situations, all things I still struggle with to this day. My life has been filled with the many joys and obstacles of living life with a disability. While I am on the spectrum, much of my career actually has been in church engagement and advocacy on behalf of immigrants with the immigrant community. So this has included working with churches and the broader community to build a vision for welcome and to disciple them to see God's heart for the sojourner. Both of these experiences, both having autism and working in advocacy, have led to questions about the role of the church in creating spaces of welcome and inclusion. In my short time today, I would like to share some insights that I have gained through my experience as a disabled person working in advocacy. And my hope is that I can provide some ideas for you to not only create a welcoming welcoming environment within the church walls, but to disciple your members to do that and live out the call of the radical welcome of Jesus wherever they go. One insight I believe is helpful as we advocate for the disability community and with the disability community is to creating spaces of welcome is that community is hard. I know what you're thinking. Thanks, Austin. We flew all the way over here for you to tell us that community is hard. Unfortunately, my work in advocacy has shown that unfortunately this truth, even though it is obvious, it is often neglected. With our culture of quick fixes and technological advancement, I believe we've deceived ourselves into believing that we can create community with the snap of a finger. And if it proves to be more difficult than expected, we often walk away and give up. I believe if we are to disciple our congregations to serve those with disabilities, we must remember that this is hard work. It takes great sacrifice of resources and convenience, as well as a willingness to be vulnerable with each other. All things that I would argue are foreign to our current way of life. We need to reject what I call microwave ministry and become more comfortable with the slow cook of community building. Someone that I admire, Dr. Luke Bretherton, he's a current professor of moral and pastoral theology at Christ Church, Oxford, in the UK. He writes in his book, Christ in the Common Life, a common life with and for others, including non-human life, is a prerequisite for human flourishing. The good or flourishing life cannot be reduced to individual happiness, as we are not atomized monads, but mutually vulnerable, interdependent creatures whose flourishing depends on being embedded in just and loving forms of common life. I would argue that we as Christians are called to build a common life within the church and outside of it around the historical reality of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In our right desire to proclaim Christ crucified, though, what we too often miss is that the new kingdom brings transformation not only to individuals, but to whole communities. Additionally, I think there's a second pattern that I have come to see as someone with a disability working in advocacy. As I've already mentioned, there are many reasons for exclusion oftentimes in churches. For many, it's a perceived lack of resources. We cannot do what we need to do because we can't afford it. We don't have the money. For others, it's a lack of awareness and or education. We just don't know what to do. We don't know how to welcome them well. I believe these are both real challenges to welcoming the disability community, but I believe there's another reason just under the surface. I would say that many churches do not seek to welcome because inclusion of the disability community can lead to challenges to our understanding of the work of God in the world and challenges to the way we do ministry. To put it more simply, I believe that including the disability community threatens the status quo. I believe a recent interaction, actually in my own small group, illustrates this point. We were having a discussion about Exodus, and one of our college students in our group asked a question about how individuals with intellectual disabilities can receive the gift of salvation if they cannot proclaim their faith in Jesus. While my 10 minutes will not provide me the time to talk about salvation and disability theology, which we can more than happy to talk about that out there, I believe it reveals a concrete example of how inclusion of people with disabilities can lead to challenges of our understanding of the world. I believe that churches and congregants can often operate in a ministry that claims to hold abstract theological principles and yet fail to see how they are connected to the welcome and inclusion of marginalized communities. Our understanding of humanity has major consequences for how we choose to either include or exclude the disability community. And with our inclusion, we open up our many assumptions about life and ministry to critique and challenge. And again, I would argue that while it may not be stated explicitly, churches and ministries decide in practice that inclusion is too costly, not always because of the monetary value or the lack of awareness, but because it threatens our neat understandings of how to do ministry. Another author that I highly respect, Dr. Sarah Barton, who is a professor of theology and an occupational therapist, says in her book, Becoming the Baptized Body, without robust connections between practice and doctrine, Christian communities remain entrenched in patterns of belonging that relegate disabled people to marginalized positions within the church, or worse, exclude them entirely. Now, I admit that what I've presented so far can be disappointing and discouraging to those, especially on the front lines of disability ministry. But not wanting to leave the conversation there, I would like to give a couple of suggestions for ways forward. One broad idea and then one more practical suggestion. First, I believe that we must develop a more robust understanding of our political theology. And again, I hear you saying, Austin, right now, especially, we don't need any more politics. And I would say I absolutely agree if you're talking about partisan politics. But what I mean is we need to understand the church's role in seeking the good of the polis or the city. While a major concern for all of us here is how to minister well to the families that come through the threshold of our church doors, I would argue that we cannot separate how we serve within the church from how we operate outside of it. While church is contrasted with the world in much of our understandings of Christianity, both are communities that seek flourishing in some way. And in advocating for people with disabilities, we must paint a picture of flourishing that encompasses spiritual, emotional, and communal health. I believe the prophet Isaiah shows this idea in chapter 58 when he directly connects the faithfulness of the people of Israel with how they care for the oppressed, the hungry, the naked, and the poor. I believe that we should follow Isaiah's call in our pursuit of welcome. And second, on the more practical side of ministry, I believe we must become more comfortable with the messiness of discipleship. Again, while I do not believe this is a new idea, it is a muscle I believe we do not often exercise. Including families and individuals impacted by disability, or anyone for that matter, requires being comfortable with mistakes, mess-ups, and ambiguity. All things I've had to learn to deal with. As I've learned in my advocacy work, healthy discipleship is being willing to play the long game and to build trust day by day as we build a vision for all to experience the hospitality of Christ. I would argue that one way in which we can do this is to let our appreciation of the mysteries of God inform how we do ministry. Just as we serve a God who is impossible to fully grasp, we work in ministries where there will always be unanswered questions, unfinished tasks. Sorry, your planners are not going to fix everything. And uncertainty about what comes next, no matter how hard we plan. But we must remember that biblical inclusion is our ultimate goal, not beautifully catered programs. While I believe this conversation around advocating with the disability community is an ongoing conversation, I hope that my experience, both as someone with autism and who has worked in advocacy, has provided you with some ideas to reflect on as you continue to create places of redemptive hospitality. And I pray that as we paint a picture of how the work of Christ provides restoration to individuals and communities, as evidenced by our love for the marginalized, including those with disabilities, more and more people will see the beauty of the kingdom of God. Thank you.